A liberal atheist that lives in the suburbs with his family in the Midwest sits down and talks to a Christian in a motorcycle gang that lives out west. This conversation was a wild ride, and I hope you enjoy listening to it as much as I enjoyed having it. Thomas Neal makes his second appearance on the podcast, and we talk about our differences, and we also talk about how all of the things that we do to try to be better men and to be more confident and to be more actualized, all of these things actually have a lot more overlap than you would think on the surface, which kind of embodies exactly why I wanted to do this podcast. People spend so much time online hating the other side. And I think empathy really is a secret sauce to being a good person, to having a healed, happy society. So I hope that this conversation is entertaining to you and also gives you hope to maybe go out and to listen to someone that you think that you would normally disagree with. Sit back and enjoy, and welcome to Awoken Dudes. Today's guest is none other than Thomas Neal.
Break more bread than ties as the time passes.
What's up, brother? Welcome to the suburbs.
Yeah, suburbia, Indiana.
You know, if 16-year-old me knew that I'd be living in the suburbs, talking to a Jesus motorcycle man, wearing a Green Day sweater, I'd be like, you sold out, you son of a bitch.
Dude, honestly, the things that I want in life now versus what I used to want, I used to think I couldn't reconcile it. One of my favorite bands, A Plea for Purging, I remember in my early 20s, like I was like so about it, but one of the lyrics was like, when the kid you were hates the man you became. And I was like, oh, I'll never be that guy. And I'm like, wait a minute. Would the kid I was, as hard-headed and stubborn as I was, would I look at myself and be like, what the hell's wrong with you? And I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I understand nuance a lot better now, though.
Yeah, I know. You have to change. Don't be afraid of change.
Yeah.
And really, the things that you like the most about you, and you're a punk, arrogant kid, a lot of people go back to that at some point in their life anyway, right? Like the challenging the system. Then people get scared. But that's why I like you, because I feel like you're still challenging things.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, on the quest for meaning, trying to wake up, being a woken dude. Name of the podcast. I don't know.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Well, what's funny is I'm searching for truth in different ways than I used to. But I think the thing that I mean is like growing up, I was like, I'm gonna be the front man of a band or even the drummer of a band, whatever it was at the time. And I was like, I'm going to tour and I'm going to chase that. And I'm going to either do that or end up in a van down by the river.
Yeah. Then you ended up touring in a van down by the river with a motorcycle gang.
Yeah. Which is the irony of it. And I love it, but it's funny because thinking back, it's like, that's all I wanted is I just wanted to play music and freaking just travel doing that.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I still want to make music, but zero desire to do the tour life thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway.
Aren't you kind of doing the tour life thing?
I was to some degree, but just off the back of a motorcycle. I did more last year than this year.
Yeah.
Well, it's been wild the last 2 years. By the way, if you saw the last one, life is cool, but it is wild.
Yeah. So I'm sure people that watched the last one will watch this one too. But for anyone that didn't watch, Thomas and I did, this is the second time on the podcast. The first time I talked to him when you pulled up in a van that you'd converted to live into because, you found a few.
Yeah, and I was like a month away from leaving Indiana.
Yeah, a few flame-throwing, flame dancer hula hoop girls were like, you should live in a van. And Thomas was like, yeah, that's not what happened. But you did.
I think you're confusing your story with my story.
You dove into van life.
Uh-huh.
And then went out, and I joked that you were joining a motorcycle gang, but you were joining a group of people that ride motorcycles, fix motorcycles. So maybe give like an intro to the book for the people that don't know the backstory. Yeah.
So last time we talked, I was about to hit the road. I grew up, born and raised Indiana here, and I always wanted to leave. The one that finally stuck, though, is that I did decide to move into the van. I built it out, and April 21, I guess it would have been, is when I hit the road. And, I went straight to Wyoming. Wasn't sure if I was going to have a job. Wasn't sure if I was going to be like going from Wyoming to somewhere else. Just wasn't sure. But I went and I hung out with a bunch of my friends at Go Fast Don't Die because they're just good people and they're the ones that inspired me to hit the road.
I'm going to put a pin in this real quick. Go Fast Don't Die is a brand led by a guy named
Brady McLean and Brett Riley primarily.
And Brady's like the face of the brand. He's like a
He'd hate if you said that. He's the visionary. Most people know him as the kind of the person behind the brand for sure.
Well, like he's got a face and a personality and is posting on his social media a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he tries to separate himself from the brand. Like the brand to him is he wants it to be beyond him. And so, and I think it is, but he definitely is the one that people relate to the brand. So you're right in that. But, so Braden McLean, one of my brothers now, he and Brett, they both run the brand, and it's a clothing brand, but it's more an ethos that just happens to put their ethos on T-shirts and sell them. And they live the life. So up until recently, they spent a lot more time on the road than they have the last couple of years, but that's just because, I mean, obviously the weather world's gone. It's been harder for them to, spend as much time on the road, which is fine, between family stuff and just the world being the way it is and all that. But they like live the ethos. It's very much you're gonna no one gets out alive. Live accordingly. It's one of the big taglines, and that's sort of the way that they try to live, right? So
that's like a very stoic thing too.
Mm-hmm. He reads a lot of what's that guy's name? Aurelius.
Marcus Aurelius.
There it is. Yeah. So a lot of his ideologies do come probably from that, I think. But
made popular by Ryan Holiday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the Daily Stoic. Yeah.
Yeah. I think he is actually reading that one.
Yeah, I'm sure he is.
Yeah, I saw it in his stories, and I think that's what it was. But anyways, yeah, he's, like I said, he's a brother of mine. I feel like he and I see the world very similarly, which is what drew me to him and that crew. And anyway, so I went out, not sure whether I was going to get a job or not, or if I was even going to stay in Wyoming. Ended up traveling with them for the month of whatever, May, I guess it would have been. And then they gave me a job. Being the secondary videography person for the brand, and I chose to make very little money but have my travels paid, and I spent that entire summer on the road last year and shot videos from my motorcycle mostly and photos, and which is don't do that unless you are really good at riding. Don't do that, or at the very least willing to pay the consequences if it goes wrong.
Disclaimer.
Yes, disclaimer.
I'm gonna have to put one at the beginning.
Yep. Yeah. I live life dangerously, but that goes to another one of the ethos of the brand is risk happy. Like
risk happy.
Yes.
Okay.
Risk happy. Learn how to find, like, chase your happiness at risk. Like again, no one makes it out alive, so live accordingly. Mm-hmm. It means that, like, at the end of the day, on the back of one of the t-shirts it says 20 years from now you will regret the things you didn't do more than the things you did. And I think that's how I've chosen to live my life the last couple of years. But that said, I do a lot of things that most people wouldn't. What's the word I'm looking for here? Hypothetically, if I was to stand, if it was possible to stand on a motorcycle while riding at 30, 40 mile an hour, I would maybe have done that.
Yeah.
I'm a little crazy, not gonna lie.
Yeah, I do that sometimes on my bicycle still.
Yeah.
Not a motor. Still feels pretty, feels pretty dangerous. Feel pretty free.
Well, on the seat. No hands.
Yeah. No, it's pretty wild. From what I've seen of the brand, it definitely epitomizes like living free or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it's funny you said the thing about you'll regret the things you didn't do versus the things you did do. Mm-hmm. And that is like one of those bumper sticker expressions. Like if it works, work it. And the more I dive into this world of self-development, finding one's truth, self-actualizing, mm-hmm. all of those things start to make sense to me now, which all like, kind of goes back to the 15-year-old me. It'd be like, are you going to get a hang in there, baby poster too?
Yeah. Live, laugh, love.
Loser.
Well, and it's funny because like the cliches are cliches because they're usually true. And like some of that stuff does feel like, oh yeah, I know, I get it. But when you really get it, you start to go, okay, it really is worth living like that.
Yeah.
And it's scary at first. Like people probably look at my life and go, oh, you must never get scared. I mean, my brother and I were talking the other day just about my latest life change. He's like, hey, you've never been too scared to just jump. And I was like, well, I get scared, but yeah, I'm not too scared to jump. That's true.
Yeah, I think that's important for people to hear. So you were someone who left everything, right? You went through like a divorce, hard time, and then you're like, fuck this, there's another way.
Yeah.
And then you went and lived this, what you would consider to be a courageous, freewheeling lifestyle. But there was fear there.
Yeah.
And that fear, at least in my experience and most people I've talked to, so I want to ask you, does that fear ever go away?
I mean,
of the change.
Every time I go to do something, there's always the stirring in the gut that doesn't go away. And no matter how much right here I know I'm fine, there's always that. I'm a gut processor anyway, so like everything processes through the gut.
That sounds so gross.
It does sound gross, but we talked a little bit about the Enneagram last time. That's where my quote-unquote center of intelligence is. It's either the gut, the heart, or the brain first. Now, we process through all of them, but my first and initial response is always like gut instinctual responses to things. And so I've always got that gut like, oh, well, you better be ready. But, I mean, I didn't mean to wear this today, but like the Bible phrase, you know.
I wondered if that was
sight.
like silent protesting, because I'm like pretty open about being like an atheist online. And I was
Well,
like,
I know.
oh man,
I know.
Like,
And that's,
he's protesting across from me, but we're sitting here.
yeah.
Yeah, not fisticuffing.
You can get along perfectly fine.
I think we have a lot more in common. I think the people that I know that like are very devout Christians that to me embody what it is to be a religious holy person. I have more in common with those people than the people that are passively saying they're Christians. And
Absolutely.
like, when's the last time you like helped somebody? And
Right.
they're like, well,
Right.
help myself.
Well, I
get a
don't. I mean,
Audi last week.
yeah, I mean, I went to, like, I've been to a couple churches a couple times in the past 2-3 years or more, to be honest. Like, I have a hard time with, I call it churchianity, because to be honest, when it comes to the current culture climate of faith, I have a lot of issues with the way that things are presented. It doesn't look anything like the Church of Acts, et cetera, et cetera. Don't really need to go down that road. But that said, I have come to find that, like, through my perspective of belief, every time I've done something crazy or every time something's gone wrong, it always ends up okay. And I believe that's because, personally, I believe it's because every time I do something crazy, God's like, I got your back. Like, it's either going to work out or it's not. And if it's not going to work out, then I believe the Bible says that he works out all things for the good of those that love him. So I always keep going. And so that has been proven in my life over and over again, that eventually things end up working out in a much more beautiful way than I probably would have expected. But it didn't work out the way I expected it to. So,
Yeah. So I want to say this just so I can soundbite out on Instagram and stuff. You're a Christian.
Yes.
I'm an atheist. But I think that the way we have found God, not everyone, but I think the way that you and I have found God individually is very similar. Mm-hmm. And what you were just saying about God has got your back. Mm-hmm. Hang in there, baby.
Yeah.
To me, the way I hear that and interpret that in my own vernacular, in my own
Understanding.
paradigm,
Okay.
is that God is this like hidden force, right?
Okay.
That no one can actually, I don't think anyone can actually like literally define it. But the way that I've been defining it lately, to the best of my abilities, is that if I act in a way that's good, that serves my brothers, serves my community, and I'm on the righteous path, that the universe will have my back.
I could say that makes some sense. Yeah, I feel like there's something to that for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know how to word what I'm thinking, but essentially, if the world is created by a God that is good, that is love, that is peace, that is all of the things that the Bible says that God is, then to do those things would be to be in his will, and would be to be a reflection of him would be a reflection of good, and so it would bring good things. It's the same thing with, like, I mean, you see that in the law of nature. It's positives attract, positives, negatives attract negatives, Anyway, we could go down a weird rabbit hole there probably, but
do you think it's weird that they say him a lot in the Christian faith?
That's funny. I actually had a conversation about this recently, and I think
I'm not trying to
No,
I have
good.
no agenda
You're good.
here. I'm just having fun.
You're good. No. I think people tend to get really wrapped up in either way. Like somebody asked me about, like, what about people that attribute the Holy Spirit to femininity? And I go, okay, well, if Genesis is correct, then God created man in his image. So that means that Adam was in a representation of God on earth to some degree, or at least a reflection of him. And if Eve was created from Adam, if Eve is femininity, that means that femininity came out of the original representation of God, which means that the representation of God was both masculine and female and feminine, which means that there's aspects of masculinity and femininity. And you ask any really good biblical teacher, they will say that you can't have the image of God without man and female. That's why the marriage is a thing. But then there's also the idea that maybe the Holy Spirit is the one that embodies more of the feminine characteristics. Maybe, I don't know. It's what it is like, clearly there's masculinity and femininity, but I do think that there's probably a good reason why the father aspect is attributed to God the Father, and the masculinity is probably a little bit more attributed. There's probably a reason for that, but that's, you have to go down a lot of different thought processes to.
The way I see it in a family dynamic is God as a man, because God was like, well, I'm going to drown everybody that doesn't listen to me.
So,
and the feminine energy is Eve saying, honey, eat an apple. And he's like, I'm not hungry. It's like, you need to eat an apple.
Yeah.
And that's how it plays out in our house.
That's funny.
No,
That's funny.
I think that it's a silly thing to get caught up on, is the nuance of the language. I can see why people care or don't care, but in my opinion, it's missing the bigger point.
Right.
But it's a fun conversation to have nonetheless.
Yeah.
I've expressed to you how I've found God in my own way, but could you, for funzy, try to articulate how you think one would find God if they didn't have the story? Or how do I word this? Could you try to define finding God without using any of the stories or the structure of the Christian faith? Because I believe that there's a bunch of different ways to do it. I don't think that there's one religion that's just right. I don't even think that it has to be religion. I think that religion is very important because it gives people a story, and everyone needs a story to align with. But is there a way that you can define the Holy Spirit and being a person of faith and spirituality without using the parameters of the word?
I'll say a couple things to that. One is, if a God did create everything, which when I look at the information put before us by science and otherwise, that seems to be the case. If there is a God that created everything, then there would be an absolute truth, which would mean that there is something that is definitive and something that isn't. And if there is a Satan, then there is a way that is distorted from the truth. That said, I know that you think that there's probably no one particular way, but when I look at especially the gospel, Jesus straight up said, he's like, there's no other way. And so C.S. Lewis says that Jesus is either who he says he is, or he's a liar, or he's a lunatic. It's really hard to look at him and go, he's just a good teacher, because he does make such bold claims. That said, to get outside of somebody knowing the story of the gospel and then finding God, I've heard a lot of testimonies of people in Iraq or Iran or all those where it's very don't talk about Jesus, that have come and said, I had a dream of a guy that said, seek me out, and I did, and I found out that he was Jesus. And then there's other people that have looked through the Quran and found that Jesus is mentioned more times than Muhammad even is. And the guy, he was a He was a sheik. Is that what they're called?
Muhammad?
No, the guys that are leaders in.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So, anyways, he was one of those.
I'm sure if you're listening and I'm wrong, you'll correct me.
Yeah,
so.
I don't remember what they're called. I'm sorry. Words. I remember things by concept. Words and vernaculars often escapes me. But that said, he was like questioning why that was, and eventually studied the Bible because of it. I've seen people say that they've come across a tribe in a jungle that had a story that basically matched the gospel perfectly, but they had never heard the gospel.
Yeah.
And they attribute that to God showing up and telling them the story, or an angel or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I think there's ways. I think there's also, like, the more I seek truth in political, historical, all these things, like the more I look at the way that the things happen, the more I realize that, okay, a lot of the things being pushed are bad. Okay, so why are they pushing those things? Okay, if they're trying to destroy the way things are in favor of things that are killing people, then why would they do that? Okay, if those things are bad, then what's good? And as I seek out the good things, the more I realize that, okay, the more that I look at the way that this is really hard to say without sounding like a conspiracy.
Should we get the tin foil?
Should I get that? Yeah.
I got some more that we can make the hats real quick.
When I look at the way that, like, things go in there, I go, okay, then if they're pushing something that's not benefiting me, then what does benefit me? What's the opposite of what they're pushing? And if they're pushing the evolution narrative really hard, but there's petrified trees throughout 3 or 4 different layers of history, you know, allegedly thousands of years apart, but there's a petrified tree in the middle of it, then that says there's something wrong there. So maybe the earth isn't as old as they claim it is. And if the, what was it? The reef, the coral reef, when they studied it after it was bombed in the last World War, they studied it for, I think, 20 years. And they said, oh, this reef, probably based at the growth rate, is probably 4,000-ish years old. Mm-hmm. Based on the story of the Bible, that means that matches up with the flood. And if it's only 4,000 years old, then why isn't there a bigger one that grew over the course of billions of years? And then same thing with, like, is it the Sahara Desert in Africa? Mm-hmm. They claim that the rate at which the desert takes over its surroundings is probably around 4,000 years old. Anyways, regardless, the more I study those things, the more I go, okay, that would make me question the narrative. And as I question the narrative, then I eventually think that I would probably get to the point of, like, okay, maybe I should start studying religious texts. And then I'd start to see that, that like the 4,000 year thing makes sense. But also, if you think about it, like, most stories have some sort of mirror to the gospel. So, like, the Muslim faith attributes itself to the other son of Abraham instead of names. Great. I can't remember the name, the names of the 2 children, but Abraham had the 2 sons. The one son was with the one woman. The other son was with Sarah, his wife, and he sent the one son away. They attribute their lineage to him. Chinese texts, so ancient Chinese, they don't teach it anymore because a lot of the symbols, when you study them, they like the characters, you know how Chinese characters tell a story within each character. Mm-hmm. A lot of the characters will tell the story of, like, woman, apple, serpent, or something like that. And I think it was like 7 or 8, whatever. It's like 7 people, vessel, flood, or like water or whatever is one character or whatever. And it, like, a lot of those characters end up telling the story of like Genesis. And so then you start, like, anyways, regardless, that's how I think I would get there if I didn't already grow up in the church, is through, like, questioning everything, starting to realize that, oh, all these things seem to me to point to a story of a creator. Yeah. And a story of a God.
One day, that'll be us. A half thought.
Yo, sorry to interrupt this session. We'll get back to it in just a second, but I wanted to take a second to let you know that I am trying to build an online community of people that want to get better. I was struggling for a long time. I didn't know what my purpose was, and I still don't in a lot of ways, but I felt so lost. I felt so alone. I was overweight. I hadn't worked out in over a decade, and I started to get my stuff together. And I did it by watching videos like this. I did it by reading. And I made a promise to myself that if I get better one day, I will do everything I can to make stuff that can potentially help you right now. One of the ways I do that is by putting out a newsletter. There's a link in the description of this video. I promise not to sell you anything or to give your email to anyone else. It's just a way for us to stay connected. Thank you so much for at least considering it. Now back to the pod.
That's a lot I know, but
Yeah. So from my understanding and what I've interpreted, and neither one of us have degrees or giving lectures on this. We're just some people that spend time online talking to people. We have brains. So take this for what it is. But you know what? People listen to people with much less accreditation than you and I. I personally believe the world is much older than what people tell you. Mm-hmm. But there's so much in common with all of the stories from around the world. Mm-hmm. There's definitely something there.
Yeah.
And the fact that people that seem like they're empowered don't want to acknowledge that. But also, I guess people empowered generally are just trying to like get votes. So nonetheless, Graham Hancock,
I've heard the name.
Ancient Apocalypse or something like that's on Netflix right now.
Okay.
He's going around showing like evidence that there was some kind of civilization that predates any knowledge we have of modern civilization. Mm-hmm. He thinks that humans have had civilizations and been building shit for like maybe 30,000, 40, 100,000 years.
Okay.
And then something happened at some point. And it's all laid out like the story of the flood,
Right.
the story of Genesis. I mean, at the end of the last ice age, water levels, they rose, right? So that like all this land is like now gone underwater. It's pretty fascinating that even if I think you're advocating that maybe the world is not as old as people are saying, or people are on the other side saying it's older than what people are saying, the reasoning is all the same. So it's like something's off.
Yeah. Oh, and I say that about a lot of things. Like, like people ask me stuff all the time, and I'm like, I'm not saying that this is true, but I'm saying that the professionals are definitely lying about something.
Yeah.
But
Well, you have to give, I've been spending more time working in business and watching how money moves back and forth. And you can't just say the truth, which is, I don't know.
oh yeah,
You can't do that. And I would imagine even in like a scientific setting or in a university setting, if you want more time to seek truth, you have to like bid for that right.
Right.
You have to prove that there is a reason for you to continue getting funding. So I think that puts most people in a compromised position where they're giving answers because it either suits a narrative and it can, control people, or like just in the most benign way, they're like, oh yeah, it was probably that. Just so that way they can keep their jobs and keep feeding their family.
Yeah. Well, and that's true. I mean, like if you look through a lot of the history stuff, like you can't, in modern day, you can't find hardly anything about giants. However, you can, if you really dig, you can find photographs of people that are clearly way bigger than everybody else.
Yeah.
You can find newspaper articles of alleged giant bones of like 12 foot, 16 foot tall people. And then I, like you said about ancient civilizations, I actually believe that I tend to believe the story of Enoch that says that angels came down, like the Watchers is what he calls them.
Is that Zachariah Stinson?
I don't know that.
12th planet kind of.
I don't know that. I don't know that. The Book of Enoch used to be regarded, at least it seems to have been regarded as literature for that the ancient Jews used. It also seems to have been literature that everybody in the day of Jesus might have known. It seems like Jesus may have quoted it. The Book of Jude may have quoted it. And at one point, it seems to have been part of the canon of gospel, but has been removed. I'm not totally sure. I haven't gone too deep into the validity of the time frames and all that stuff. But what it seems to say seems to be potentially accurate and seems to go along with the story of Genesis as well. Which to me, the story of Genesis was, hey, here's the history of stuff. Back in those days, giants were in the land, is what it says. That's all it says about the giants thing. And then later it talks about, David and Goliath being descendant of giants. The idea was that one of Noah's married in sons or daughters, one of the two, I forget, would have had giant's blood in their blood, so that would have progressed the giant lineage past the flood. But the idea of the flood was that when it says that there was no one that was pure, also, let's fix that because I am all of a sudden blown out for sure. Anyways, whatever. I'll
Hit the arrow on the top right and then face. Cool.
Yeah.
So the story of giants and Enoch, and then I said something about Zachariah Stinson. Zachariah Stinson is an author who talked a lot about this concept of a 12th planet, which is a planet that we have our sun, the planets go around like in a circular manner, and then in an opposite circular orbit, there's this other planet that has inhabitants of some kind of civilization that propagated Earth. And Zachariah talks about in his book that most solar systems are actually binary solar systems, meaning that they have two suns, but one's usually burnt out.
Okay.
And he thinks that we are living in a binary solar system, but since we're inside of our solar system, that we can't see the burnt out dead sun that used to have this planet. It was populated with a species like us that was much more intelligent, technologically advanced, and as their sun was dying, they're like, oh, we have to hop.
Right. So
Right,
like
which is what we would do if we were advanced enough.
potentially like the Anunnaki kind of idea.
Yeah, Anunnaki's what.
Yeah. So,
You keep talking.
well, so from the Book of Enoch, what I believe is that it would have been angels that would have come down and created giants and different life forms based by breeding with humans and animals and stuff is what it seems to indicate, and that would have created the giants. And the giants, and it also teaches that those angels were the ones that taught us about things like forging metals and reading the stars and all that stuff, right? So I do believe that there was probably a civilization way back when where it was probably a little bit more advanced. But when the Bible says that there was no one pure but Noah, some people tend to believe that that means that pure of blood, not pure of heart necessarily.
Yeah.
And so that could have been the reason
no
for
one's
the flood.
pure of heart, right? No, not
Right.
humans. We all have the darkness. That's part of
Exactly.
at least from where I sit, that's part of the spiritual journey is reconciling with the darkness.
But anyways,
We're
going down some serious rabbit holes here.
serious rabbit hole. No one being pure of spirit. Let's just segue into. I saw a post of yours. Actually, I follow a brand called Fight the New Drug.
Yes, so do I. Yes.
Which is I don't know if there are
They're
anti
non-religious.
Okay,
They're not
they say
anti-religious,
that
they are
a lot,
non-religious.
and they're also not anti-porn.
They present
Because
why
I follow Exodus Cry too, which is also like I think the Exodus Cry is like they say we are an anti-porn movement, or they are definitely at least pro getting rid of they're pro not watching porn, and they're pro having extreme restrictions on the industry. So anyway, Fight the New Drug.
Well, my understanding is that they, I've seen them post about quote unquote ethical porn, and it.
So
they seem
let's
to say
let's stop right here real quick, just that way we can explain what we're going to go into for people that aren't deep into the internet like us.
Got it.
Fight the New Drug is a company who raises money to help people with porn addiction. They raise awareness around the industry of porn. And they are not a religious affiliation, but they have a pretty strong social media presence. And I follow their Instagram page, and I saw they had shared a photo of you wearing one of their shirts.
Yes.
Are you an ambassador for them?
No.
No,
I just happen to have one of the shirts.
have the shirt.
I
got it
decided to
posted.
start taking the stand, and actually, what's funny is once I started to say once I made a public hey, this has been a struggle my entire life. Once I made a public saying about that, it actually helped me really fight it even more. So I've always hated it. But it is an addiction, and that's one thing that they focus on is the fact that it is such an addicting thing. It's as addicting as, what do they say? as like a cocaine or something like that, as a methamphetamine, like, or something like that.
Yeah.
It does some seriously messed up stuff to your brain.
So, porn addiction, you were talking about you opening up and talking about how hard it was to. Sorry. No, so you started opening up more about how you hate it. Porn.
And I've always hated it.
Yeah.
So I remember like a neighbor kid was like, "Hey, my parents let me see all this stuff and put all this stuff on my wall." And then from then on, it was like, "Oh, hey, here's a thing that I don't like that I'm going to fight for the rest of my life."
How old were you, and how old was that kid?
I would have still been in middle school. So what? 12-ish, maybe 11, 12. I don't know. I guess.
So before I was
13.
I was much younger than this. Maybe I was like 5 or 6, and my dad was real dead set on me not having me grow up be a homo.
Okay.
So there was like,
Sorry.
no, he's real afraid. I think it's because he was probably secretly a little gay, and he's like, if I got the gay gene, he's got it. I got to fight against it. So he put up pictures of like bikini models and stuff, posters like on my wall as a 5-year-old. And I look back on that and I'm like, that is
so wild
and creepy. And then essentially I hate to say that my dad sexually abused me because he didn't like have sex with me or touch me, but he definitely like exposed me to like bestiality, like showed me videos of like women getting fucked by dogs, and like exposed me to porn before 12 or 13.
Jesus.
Right. So yeah, I've never said that into a microphone before. So it's interesting. Like I know that there's other people, like, and you're one of them that had a kid who may have had parents that for some reason thought it was okay, or a dad that was like trying to like fight against what he thought was like, he wanted his kid to grow up and be a straight white American or whatever. So anyway, so you were shown this kid had posters on his wall.
Yep. And then it was just like pulling up video games of just like whatever, and
video games. Like porn video games.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's crazy.
So anyways, yeah. So like grew up with, like, and then fought it for like, there's been a couple years where I'd like let it go for, 6 months or so. And then either heartbreak or whatever would
when you say let it go, you mean stop,
like just stop. Yeah.
Consuming.
And then like, after like some sort of heartbreak or something, I'd just be like, oh, well, I'd go back to the addiction thing. And
all I have to do, incognito mode, go Control Shift P, Control Shift N, hit P in the browser,
or new tabs,
private phone. Yeah.
So anyways, so it was just like, it was just constantly a fight. And this last year, I felt personally like it was like God telling me like, hey, your next fight is to get over this one. And I was like, okay, I'm finally, like, I've been sick of it for years. I have always hated the hookup culture. I've always hated all of that. I feel like it steals more than it gives, for sure. But anyways, all that said, I like mentioned something in a post, and then that being vocal about it helped me like to create a certain accountability to myself. I was like, okay, if I'm gonna freaking say that I'm fighting this shit, then I better actually fight it. Fighting this beep. But then and then I just kept deciding to be more vocal about it. Bought one of their shirts, posted a photo online, tagged them, and they reposted it, which was cool. And but that's been like this year. I really feel like I finally got to a point where it's like, okay, I'm done with this. Like, I'm tired of it. And yeah, it is. I genuinely believe, like they do, that it completely alters your brain chemistry. It messes you up in a lot of ways. And like we were talking about before we started the podcast, if I think of it spiritually or not, even if you look at like science about energy and the transfer of energy and stuff, I tend to think that sex is life-giving because it's a transfer of energy between two people. But whereas it comes to masturbating, I think that there's no transfer. It's just a stealing of your energy. And I mean, there's been like, what was it when Israel went into Palestine or whatever? I think, if I remember correctly, it was one of the times in one of the wars over there. what they did is they released a ton of pornography to the soldiers of the opposing force, and it like inhibited them in such a way that it made it easier for them to take over the area. Yeah. And so it clearly affects, like, studies over studies show that it affects the brain and your energy levels really negatively. And so I could go into why I believe it's pushed so hard, but again, I would need to get my tinfoil hat on.
Yeah. And I think what you keep alluding to when you're saying push so hard, and I vibe with this. I mean, this has been intentionally done by nations where if you can corrupt the populace, if you can make people think that they're enemies, when it's like, really, we're the 99% against the 1%, and that's how it is. Should there be a 1%? Will there always be 1% if we allow resources and goods to be traded back and forth? Probably. But at some point, that 99% needs to kill the 1%, and the 1% knows that, so they're like, keep everyone fighting with each other. Like in Russia, something they did with two groups of farmers was they made them believe that they were enemies of each other. And the Russian government convinced these farmers that the reason their farms weren't succeeding was because of the other farmers and their success. And then they told the same story to the other side. And they're like, if we keep them fighting like this, it's like the equivalent of like doing the hand up here so you can kick someone in the nuts. This is us fighting with each other. But also it's interesting, the chemical warfare aspect you were just saying, because we used to dump LSD on people, right? Like in Vietnam and stuff, make people trip out and make people not fight. So porn is a pretty effective way to do it. And you may think, well, the people just won't watch it, but easier said than done, right? I just did a video for YouTube. There's no fap for 30 days because I found myself where I was in this habit of opening my laptop for a second. It's like I'm alone in my house. And normally I spent years never being alone. Yeah. And then all of a sudden I'm alone all the time. Yeah. So that used to be the time where I'd be, well, not even bored. I think there's a lot of shame that's unnecessarily put around people that are like practicing self-love and masturbation. And I'll talk about that in a second. But the time that I would do that and practice self-love was when I was alone. So then I had all this time alone. And then it's like, well, maybe it's boredom too, but it's like, do I want to work or do I want to give in desire? Like, what's the friction point? Work is sitting down and making myself right, making myself do something. And then the pleasure sensor is literally, it's the P on the keyboard. That's all I have to do.
Right. It's the dopamine hit. It's the same as.
Yeah. So cheap dopamine is shit dopamine. Yeah. Right. So, and I don't think that I talked to you about my dad. And because I was so fortunate to have a girlfriend in high school who had parents that are, her stepdad was a psychologist. I understood how dangerous it was. So even when I was like single and sex was my vice, but it was never pornography, like I always knew how corrupting it could be. So even when I was consuming, I'd be like, okay, maybe I have to go 3 days and I can't do anything. And then I can engage in pornography and crank my hog, like my son would say. It's so gross. Dude, I asked my 13-year-old son, he's like, who are you going to talk to tomorrow? And said all this stuff. And I told him that I was going to talk to you about this topic. And I was like, do you have any questions that I should ask him? Because he's 13. Like, I need to have these talks with him. And he said, ask him if he cranks his hog. Like you're not allowed to say that at dinner around the girls.
Oh, my.
Yeah, so it's cheap dopamine, really, right? Yep. And man, it is a powerful one. So thank you, Juan, for opening up about it. There's so many avenues I want to take with this. So how long have you been abstaining? And let's give some practical advice, actually.
Probably 6 months.
6 months? Okay, so if someone who's watching this is like, I want to watch no porn or less porn, or I want to no fap, I want to like give this a break. What are some practical tips that you could give someone to help them keep their hands off their hog?
Well, I mean, I think
we shouldn't make it too funny, but no, seriously, because
I think there is the level of accountability. Obviously, that makes something. There's a reason why, like Alcoholics Anonymous is a thing. It's because addictions, like you do have to have some sort of accountability. There's also some level of like you gotta really give a damn about not doing it.
So it starts with the desire.
I think so. I think that, well, and if you don't want to not do something, then you're going to just keep doing it. It's like my uncle was always like, it's like, I don't go to AA because I'm not a quitter. You know, like he didn't want to quit. And eventually that and all the drugs killed him, but like he didn't want to quit. And it was like, you're not going to quit if you don't want to, period. But then obviously it's also a powerful thing. I wanted to quit for years. And occasionally I'd finally kick the habit and then heartbreak would start back up. But I think it also, actually, you know what? I think it also, a lot of that sometimes when it comes to addiction in general, I think it comes down to like inner healing and realizing where, like, what void are you filling in yourself? And I've spent a lot of time.
Yes.
I've spent a lot of time over the last couple of years, like digging through the, like, why do I feel certain ways about certain things? Like, okay, I know this about my parents when I was born. I know this about my parents when I was born. I know this about how they interacted with each other and how it probably triggered certain feelings in me as an infant and why it probably did this. I understand why I felt this sort of depression when I was a teenager. I understand this, why, like, I'm digging through all these different things all the way back to, like I said, freaking when I was really, really young, figuring out the whys. And then, okay, how does that translate to now? Okay, I don't want to be like that. So who do I want to be? What do I want to be rather than that? And going through all the stuff that people don't want to go through. I think we might have talked about this last podcast, but I think a lot of people don't question reality or themselves because it is questioning yourself. And that's uncomfortable. And it is uncomfortable to go back that far and to actually dive into your stuff. That's why I don't want to go to a shrink. And we talked about last time why I don't go to a therapist. I genuinely don't believe that a traditional therapist helps me because I have zero relation to them. So instead, I go to people that I actually trust, that understand psychology well enough, and I process things with them. And I'm really real with myself about what I think and what I believe and what I feel about myself. And like, oh, wow, I don't like that about myself. And instead of burying it and whatever, I go, all right, then how are we going to cut this off? Yeah, it's going to be like pruning a freaking branch on a tree. It's going to suck. I might have to literally cut something off of myself. And just like a tree bleeds a little sap, I'm probably going to bleed a little bit of emotional blood, but it's got to be done.
I keep thinking in phallic metaphors.
Leave the gutters on the roof, man. I'm just kidding. Anyways.
I think being honest with yourself when you're an addict, or if you have a porn addiction, I've heard people say that porn isn't a real addiction because you have to have sex. And it's like, I guess I get where people are coming from, but I think acknowledging
addiction is just that dopamine release. That's why, like,
well, hang on a second. I think, no, it's okay. You know, you're the guest, but I think to surmise what you're saying, it's like, you have to be honest with yourself. Mm-hmm. And the way that I have started being honest with myself is by journaling. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I can write anything I want about myself. If it's a truth that I think is too hard to handle, like, John, you drink too much. John, you are consuming pornography, or you are cranking your hog way too much. Write that down. And then I've taken it before and crumbled it up and thrown it away. And like, I'll get to that later. But it starts the process of, like, being honest with yourself. Yeah. And whether sex addiction or porn addiction is labeled in the DSM-5, porn is for sure a drug. Mm-hmm. And you can't have an honest relationship. Like, if you were doing a line of cocaine every morning, mm-hmm. and you didn't acknowledge that it was a drug that was rewiring your brain, yep. and you wanted to stop doing it, I don't think that you could even begin the process of doing it less or not doing it at all. Like, you have to acknowledge that it's a drug. Mm-hmm. So I guess I was looking for advice like that. Do you ever find yourself in a situation where you're like feeling the urge, nature's calling, and then like hands up in the air, talk to yourself? Like, how do you, when you're battling and you're alone and you could be doing the thing, because it's so easy to get to, like, do you have restrictions around that? How do you do that?
I guess for me, it's more the acknowledging that I want to be better. And again, there's the level of like, okay, I've told people that I'm not doing this. So I'm like, first of all, I don't want to have that conversation with them. Like, me being me, I'm like, I don't want to have that conversation with them. That's like, oh, I fucked up. And that's kind of annoying. And
you come out of the bedroom at your parents' house, you're like, I was wanking, I didn't want to, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, guys. They're like, whoa, no, did you lock the door?
Jesus. No, but no, There's that. There's the fact that like me personally, I'm just like I want to be a better person in general. There's the fact that I know for myself that in the past it's like I felt like masturbation actually took away from my sex life when I was in relationships.
So you're not masturbating at all?
Correct.
Oh man, what
It
happens?
actually does take away from. For me, I feel like it takes away from it.
Yeah, no, for sure. What do you have a partner? Are you intimate? Do you have a way to release the seed?
I didn't for a long time.
Yeah, man, because when I was single, I felt like it made me too hyper to go too long. I never
Really?
did. Yeah,
Interesting. No, I have heard that like your energy levels kind of do some things, and I think it's similar with most things in your body. I think like there's studies that show that if you wash your face with chemicals too much, you take away too much oils, and so your body rebounds by adding too much chemical. And then same thing with your hair. If you wash your hair too much, then it'll overstimulate with too much oil, and then you have to get special shampoo for overly oily hair. When actually, if you washed your hair maybe once a week, it would eventually realize, oh, we're balancing out the way we need to, and it wouldn't get overly oily. So same thing with like I think energy levels. It's the same thing with caffeine. Like your body really, really needs caffeine for a long time until you get off of it. Granted, that's probably the one addiction I'm not kicking anytime soon. But
there's also chocolate and sugar in that cup. You're a damn monster.
but
So you're saying that your body self-regulates?
what I wonder is because of the time off, like there's the rebound time and then eventually the balancing out. That's what I would assume.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure if there's really studies on that. I know you guys like Jim Carrey and stuff talk about the fact that it goes like certain chemicals go back up at your spinal cord and then back down and whatnot. And
Yeah. Well, there's this whole like practice of Alexis and I have a very healthy sexual relationship, and we've been together long enough. We're like, let's try some Kundalini. Let's try some tantric stuff. And part of it is
I don't know what those words mean. I'm not sure.
Kundalini is your inner energy, your inner strength, your aura, like manipulating that. A way to do that is with semen retention. I can speak anecdotally that if I've retained my sperm for like 7 days, 10 days, 15 days, it's like seeing the world in Technicolor after watching nothing but black and white films.
Really? Now, see, I do find that.
But I did
find that I had more energy.
Yeah, and then also like I sexualized things more, and not like in a perverted way or not in a machismo, gross, like I'm sexualizing children or something fucking weird like that. Yeah, which would be weird because there's a preschool over here. I wouldn't be allowed to live here technically. No. But at one point, Alexis was like, dude, keep your hands off of me. Like, give me a second. I'm like, but you look so sexy. She's like, I'm literally just cooking. I'm like, yeah.
Interesting.
But it's like, I think you want that energy. Part of me, I think, was afraid to embrace that energy for a long time because of the shame around it. I didn't want to be like my dad.
Right.
And then I feel like when I was single, I was very honest about like, I was very much a proponent of hookup culture for a long time. But I was always like very honest about it. But I still felt shame around it.
Yeah.
So I think when I start to feel like sexually open, like I immediately feel shame at the same time. So what's the longest you've retained?
Probably 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah.
Man, do you feel like on edge? Do you feel like you have to like?
I actually feel clearer head. I feel like I'm like now if I spent less time on my freaking doing this, I'd probably feel a little bit more like alive in the world, I guess. But there's a little bit of like just like I don't know. I feel more what's the word? I'll think of it eventually. I feel more like in the moment, I guess.
Yeah, mindful.
Like I don't know. I do think that there's a lot more in like happening in the brain and in the energy levels and all that stuff that I don't understand. But I do feel like I just feel like a clearer, better person. I mean, and maybe there is some level of that, like there's shame around it and whatnot, and there's like so like the shame then beats down. I do feel like it's probably got the shame response to part of it, but I do feel like I'm more apt to anger if I do.
Yeah.
Like if I give in.
Yeah, I'm definitely more anxious if I'm, even when I was drinking, but like if I'm cranking the hog more, it's like I'm definitely more anxious.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's because you're depleting your dopamine.
That's probably part of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
probably some of the shame part, but yeah, I'm way more prone to like hot anger.
Yeah. Same. Also, porn, like acknowledging that it's a drug, I think is the first step into porn recovery or whatever you want your relationship to look like with it. Like, full disclosure, Alexis and I watch porn together sometimes, and we actually try to do it in the most ethical way that we can.
Right.
Like, I know that like definitely the big companies like Pornhub, Xvideos, Tubes, this and that or whatever, they're all run by scumbags.
Yep.
No doubt. It makes me so mad. But we live in a time where everyone has cameras, so a lot of people, we're horny monkeys. We film ourselves, put it online. Like you can go find stuff where you're pretty sure it's not an abusive situation. It could be, and there's also a company called Make Love Not Porn, which is like vetted, authentic couples and stuff. But it sucks, and you have to pay to get into it. So anyway, Alexis and I will sometimes watch ethical porn together. But I think that if you have a problem with it, you shouldn't do that.
Right.
Like it'd be like people that do cocaine once a month. Like good for them. I can't do that, so I don't do it.
Yeah.
But acknowledging that it's a drug, and it's also a drug in the sense that like it's hyper dopamitic. Like you get dopamine from having sex. Like if someone gave you their phone and they're like, here's a video of me and my wife banging or whatever you're into, like your friends, your two husbands, whatever it is, and they said, watch this, you'd get a dopamine response. But porn isn't that. It is access to, you can have 100 tabs open and not even scratch the surface. And it's there instantly. So I think when you're depleting yourself of that and you're doing it rapidly,
Well, they also
it's going to make you miserable.
Studies also show that it disconnects. I forget what the brain portions are, but there's the portion that like that does the dopamine and gives you the whatever. Then there's the part of your brain that naturally inhibits that going off. And the study shows that the more porn you watch, the more disconnected they get, which means that you can't inhibit yourself as easily. It actually removes your ability to inhibit yourself. Not entirely, but enough so that that's why it becomes so addictive.
Porn over time detaches the part of your brain that allows you to
Pump the brakes, essentially.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
So,
well, it's
Fight
like
the New Drug
habit-based
posted that.
identity, right? Like when you're a chronic wanker, like it's hard to not be a chronic wanker because you believe yourself to be a chronic wanker.
Well, I don't think it's completely that. That's what I mean. Like that study, it was on Fight the New Drug. There's actually the video of the lady. I can send it to you. She actually talks about it. And she said that they studied it, and she expected actually that like that it would be completely different, but it did the exact opposite of what they expected. And it basically it's like the brakes on a rail car. It's almost like it disconnects the brakes enough that like you get barely any brake power.
Yeah.
Right. So
like the brake power is the ability to self-regulate.
Yes.
And, okay. That makes sense. I mean, if you're a guy, I don't know what it does to women, but if you're a guy and you've been compulsively watching pornography, I mean, it's like trying to pull with a rope, right? So that's hard. Yeah. So is there like a practice that you do if you feel the urge to relapse?
I don't know. I just try to distract myself, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm just the type of person that's just like, no, don't do that, you dumb. And then I freaking, oh, come on, be better. Same thing in the gym. It's like if I miss
so you
a
talk
weight,
to yourself.
I'm like, I mean, but I'm the type of person that always talks to myself.
Yeah. No, but I do it too.
Right.
I would be like, all right, horny monkey, what are you doing, John? What are you doing? Like, if you could see yourself right now, pants
trying
around
not
your
to cuss,
ankles,
obviously.
Laptop, you'd be like, what are you doing?
Yeah, stupid dumb idiot. No, yeah, I'm very much the type that it's just like, no, come on.
Yeah.
And I'm that kind of guy. I'm that way with the gym too. It's like if I miss a lift that I should have hit, I immediately am just like, come on, don't be a little, and just freaking, come on, be better, be better. And I actually have that conversation with myself about a lot of things, a lot more recently. Is that like even when it comes to simple things like, hey, make the bed, clean the dishes, do the things, be better, dude. And I tell myself that all the time. I'm just like, just be better. You want to be better. You genuinely want to be the best version of yourself that you can be. So just be better. Don't do that thing or do that or get that thing done or do this. So that's kind of probably, I guess, That makes sense.
Yeah, it seems like there is a movement to stop people from being hard on themselves, but I think it's absolutely necessary.
I think there's levels. Now there's a difference between like, now in the gym, I think me going like, don't suck is one thing, because in the gym, it's like, there's that aggressive fight. It's like the battle thing. It's like, I think there's minuscule amounts of like the negative self-talk that can be beneficial. I do think though that the hard on yourself thing is important, but there's the level of, I used to constantly be like, why am I such an effing idiot? Why am I so like don't be so stupid, whatever. Like there's the very negative self-talk that I think is unhealthy. However, there is the like, be better, like that is good. I think, and that's like very much like, I'm being a little bit hard on myself, yes, but I'm also not being a dick to myself.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
No,
But I agree.
The balance, it's one of those bumper sticker statements, but you have to be honest with yourself. Like,
Exactly.
yeah, love your flabby body, but be like, I got a flabby body. Do I want to continue having one? No. And
Right.
then, so when you're sitting around and you're like, I got a flabby body, instead of saying, you're such an idiot, you got a flabby body, be like, I'm a little flabby. And that's fine. I'm here now, but I'm going to do something about it.
Yep.
You know,
Or if you don't mind and you're not unhealthy, then cool. So be it. If you're unhealthy, love yourself for who you are, but you should probably do something about it.
one of the self-talk things I've been doing recently, I'd be like, of course you want to go and look at porn, John. Of course you want to see naked images. And a lot of times it's like, you know, Alexis and I have cell phones. We're very active sexually. 90% of the time, it's photos that she's sent to me when we first started dating. But even then, it's a distraction from the goal.
Yeah.
But I'll talk to myself and go, of course, your favorite thing that you have access to instantly is a big distraction. But you can't do that right now.
Right.
What kind of person do you want to be? If there was the Joe Rogan quote that's like, imagine a documentary crew was, it would be a real weird documentary. If it were following me around 6 months ago, it'd be like, what kind of film? This isn't going to go on Netflix. It might actually. I don't know.
Yeah.
Alexis watches some stuff on Netflix where I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
You can't make me feel bad for watching the stuff that I do. I get it that the plot line of my videos are like, I'm a stepsister and I'm stuck.
Yeah.
Not a great story, but you know, honestly, it's almost on par with the new not Lord of the Rings, the Dungeons and Dragons or
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones.
There it
Yeah,
is.
yeah. I'd rather watch I'm Stuck, Help Me than, oh my God, the dragon baby third generation, whatever. But just as much sex in that. You know, you're talking about the shame piece. If sex comes up on our TV with our kids, we'll be like, oh, we'll feel so uncomfortable. But if someone's face gets smashed in with a rock during a movie,
Oh, dude. Yeah.
yeah, well, I feel that way, right? But like most people don't turn their kids away from that, right? It's so the drug aspect of pornography is one thing, and it's unfortunate that you have that, and then also the shame wrapped up in it, and it's just, man, it's a nightmare. And I think if you can figure out how to navigate through that, the better. And I think abstaining from porn is probably the way to do it.
Yeah.
So good for you, man.
I want to say, like, I like the fact that you and I can have this conversation because we have different perspectives on like morality and like somewhat of morality and of what you should or shouldn't do and all that stuff. And like, I think one of the things that I love about it is that like I can stand here and say no to all of it, and you can go, well, maybe ethical, maybe this, maybe that, within the bounds of me and my wife, this, that, and the other, whatever. Like, and I'm just like, well, for me, I know it's a hard no on all of it because of the way that it makes me feel. And that's like where it comes to with people is like, you're going to be in different places of life, and you're going to have to decide where your line is, and that's fine. I think
Know thyself.
my
right?
brain goes to like the Christians that'll listen to me and go, why aren't you saying that he should not do any whatever? What's funny is I'm finding myself becoming much more, I don't want to say anarchist, but like so anti-governing people, and so much of like Like you can't tell people like what we're doing right now is we're presenting some facts about like how the chemistry of your brain does the things and why it's probably not a good thing and why you probably shouldn't do it. But what neither of us is doing right now is going, hey, don't do it, you idiot. You know, and that's what I love about this conversation. I just wanted to present that as like a thing of like, there's no need for any of us to just go, hey, do not do these things, because really, realistically, regulating people's morality is stupid and only ends in, you know, harm of people. And so just the fact that of like, if more people could literally sit here and have the conversation about like what the facts are and what the thing is, rather than trying to tell people what they should and shouldn't do, I think we'd be in a better place.
Thanks, brother. That's why I do this stuff, man. Also, I think, you know, I disagree with you about the morality thing. I think our morals are the same.
No, well, what I mean is like
No.
we don't we line up mostly, but like there's some things that it's like for me, I'm like, well, I probably wouldn't do this, or this because of this reason, and like that's what I mean. I think morally we do line up on most things, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, let people govern themselves as long as they aren't hurting someone else. Be a steward of faith and discipline and whatever, I think by whatever means necessary. You kind of are more narrow with that, but I like that. I like those parameters. I think also what we're saying that's similar, but we're getting there different ways is like, you know thyself, figure it out. Like, what do you want your life to look like?
Yeah.
And a lot of people are living their life in a way that doesn't align with how they would design their ideal life. And when your ideal life shouldn't have anything to do with money.
Yeah.
It should be, am I treating people with love and respect? Am I answering the call to the higher power? Because I think it's there for everyone. I think even if you're atheist and agnostic, it's fucking weird that we just exist. Yeah. It's weird that we have spirits. It's weird that we have sentience. So there is something there, and start tapping into that, because you can feel it. Like you were talking about being alkanized. If you walk out on the ground, like we are of the earth.
Yep.
Like put your hands in the dirt for a second. Be like,
yeah.
Even if we didn't come from that here, we're planted here, or if we're sitting in like a tube somewhere in virtual reality, like we are organic matter in some way. Like we all communicate. We are a tribe. I mean, look at Indianapolis from above. It looks like a fucking atom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
So
yeah.
you tap into that.
Yeah. The grounding yourself with dirt, how ions, like how you take on ions next to a moving stream of water, and how you take on ions from the grass. Why animals carry ions? Because they're walking in the grass and then they bring it in. That's why we love them so much, because they're actually literally boosting our happiness through our energy levels. Anyways, yeah, all that for sure.
Yeah, man. Well, I got one more question for you, I think.
Hit it.
Just one?
Yeah. I feel like we could talk forever.
No, I know we could. And that's the cool thing. It's like, you should have conversations with people that, like, on the surface, you and I, maybe, I don't know, because we're both pretty hippy dippy. Like, you're like a different genre of hippie, but like, if you're just like a vanilla white person, you look at both of us, you're probably like, oh, okay, they're friends. Cameras and hair and tattoos. And But I think if you wrote down like our divine principles, they may look different on the surface. But after you get past that, we can dive in, like you just said, like, oh, we could talk forever. It's like, of course we could. I'll have you back multiple times.
I love that. Appreciate it.
Yeah. What if you had to define what does it mean to be a man or person of faith? Like, what is that? How do you do that, or how are you doing that currently?
For me, it's being open and apparent of it without being a dick about it. Really, it's like it's living it. I do my damnedest to actually live it. I feel like I could point to so many religious characters that don't live it, that are, you know, like when I look at Jesus, I look at a progression of like loving people. I look at a person who was sort of bucking against the system, in that Jews didn't talk to Samaritans, much less did they really put any stock in women and all these other things. And he bucked against the system in all those ways. He bucked against the system religiously, but he was so tender and loving to people. And so for me, it's loving people well. It's loving. Plus, I've just seen it in my life. The more that I like have faith that things are going to be are going to work out, and the more that I choose to actually be good to people and love people, the more things work out anyway. But like those are the at the end of the day, it's what Jesus said. It's love God well, love people well. And that for me is like what I do my damnedest to do. Am I going to hit all of the quote unquote laws of things? Probably not. There's a few reasons for that. One is that a lot of the Old Testament laws are no longer applicable. I'm not going to get into that, but let's argue about it, Christians. Let's do it. Anyway, no, I'm just kidding.
Still don't sleep with animals. That's a big one.
No, definitely. Well, like there's a lot of things that are reiterated in the New Covenant, but regardless. Oh my goodness, I lost my track there. But basically, it's that, like, for me, being a man of faith is genuinely stepping out in faith and trusting that God's going to take care of me, and loving, like, doing my damnedest to love God well and love people really well, regardless of what they believe. And just showing them, like, learning how to show people what you think without stepping on their toes necessarily, which I love stepping on people's toes. But, like, when it comes to a lot of things, there's no need to, like, run over people, right? So
I love that, man. You know, I do the same thing. Sans God, but like everything you're saying about Jesus, like I hear that and interpret that, and I think, yeah, that's the way I should live my life too. Like in some way, like the WWJD bracelet, you can't see it, but it's on there metaphorically. Yeah,
absolutely, man.
Yeah, man. We're walking in the steps of the shepherd, or I don't know what you'd say, but we're doing it. This is what Jesus would have done. Yeah,
absolutely.
Like, I'm gonna go talk to my friend that's going to hell for sure.
Definitely. No. Just kidding. No, like, but just presenting what you believe, what you think, and doing it in a way that's respectful and loving. That's what I think. Yeah. But I mean, you know, if you don't, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Hellfire, brimstone.
I'm always so afraid. Love you, brother, man.
Love you too, man. I appreciate you. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for thinking of me.